I don't know if you can share this, but any FBI whistleblowers or DOJ whistleblowers who may be on the horizon, who's upset about the way this was handled, who may have information?
We've had some approaching our office and the committee. I obviously can't get into the details, but there are people who are upset about the non-compliance with the law, and they don't want to be held accountable, right? Anyone who is at the Justice Department who's involved with this, who's not complying, could be prosecuted for obstruction of justice. Now, Pam Bondi's not going to prosecute them, and Donald Trump isn't going to have an attorney general who prosecutes them. But, in 2029, we're going to have a Democratic president. And that Democratic president is going to have an attorney general. And that attorney general is going to prosecute the law, not out of vindictiveness, out of just saying that you can't commit crimes and get away with it. By the way, I think that should apply to crimes, not just in violating the Epstein Transparency Act. I think it should apply to crimes with ICE, crimes in terms of the strikes in the Caribbean. We need accountability before reconciliation. So if you're at the Justice Department and you know that you're violating the law, you probably don't want obstruction of justice charges brought against you. And that's why I think more and more people are speaking up.
So the White House is in full panic mode right now. And I mean absolute chaos. Donald Trump just posted something on Truth Social that has everyone from his own inner circle to legal analysts to international allies completely stunned. He's actually floating the idea of resigning from the presidency. Not speculation from the media, not rumors from anonymous sources. Trump himself is asking whether he should leave office to pursue a full-time hosting career after the Kennedy Center Honors broadcast. And before you think this is just another one of his attention-seeking stunts, you need to understand what's happening behind the scenes that has pushed him to this breaking point. This is about the Jeffrey Epstein document releases that are absolutely destroying what's left of his credibility, his legal standing, and his grip on power. We're talking about DOJ whistleblowers coming forward, members of his own Justice Department in open revolt, allies in Congress warning about obstruction of justice charges, and a cover-up operation that's collapsing in real time. This isn't a distraction. This is a constitutional crisis meets a criminal cover-up meets a psychological meltdown, and it's all happening simultaneously. The stakes here go way beyond one man's ego or one scandal. We're talking about the rule of law, the independence of federal institutions, the credibility of American justice, and whether a sitting president can successfully bury evidence of his own criminal conduct. And right now, all signs point to the fact that he can't. Now, before we dive into the specifics of what's in these Epstein files, what Trump actually said about resigning, and why his own DOJ is turning against him, I need to address something really important. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. They're either burying these stories because they're afraid of Trump's retaliation, or they're sensationalizing them without giving you the actual legal and institutional context you need to understand what's really happening here. That's why we built this channel, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. We're not funded by billionaires. We're not beholden to advertisers who want us to play nice with power. We give you the news straight every single day with the analysis that actually matters. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, if you want to understand not just what's happening, but why it matters and what comes next, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. Just hit the subscribe button below to join us. And if you want to support this work and be part of a community that truly cares about the truth, this is your moment. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop a comment below with your thoughts on whether Trump should resign. We want to hear from you. All right, let's get back to the video.
Here's what happened. Over the past 72 hours, the Department of Justice has been releasing documents related to Jeffrey Epstein as part of what's supposed to be compliance with the Epstein Transparency Act. That law, passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, requires the executive branch to disclose all non-classified information related to Epstein's activities, his associates, his criminal network, and the federal government's handling of his case. The law was designed to give the American people answers about how a prolific sex trafficker with connections to presidents, princes, and billionaires was able to operate for decades with apparent impunity. It was supposed to be straightforward. Release the documents, let the truth come out, give survivors some measure of justice through transparency. But instead of compliance, what we're seeing is a massive, coordinated cover-up operation directed from the highest levels of the Trump administration. The DOJ has been heavily redacting documents, sometimes to the point where entire pages are just black boxes. They've been slow-walking releases, dumping files at midnight to minimize media coverage. They've been selectively leaking certain documents while withholding others.
Do you think falls into the category of protecting victims, and what falls into the category of cover-up? Because obviously there is a very strong interest in making sure the victims are protected.
Yeah, I'd say probably 0 and 100. They've not shown any deference or respect for the victims at all, for the survivors of this nightmare. And it's all about covering up things that, for whatever reason, Donald Trump doesn't want to go public, either about himself, other members of his family, friends, Jeffrey Epstein, or just the social, business, cultural network that he was involved in for at least a decade, if not longer.
So do you think this actions that the Department of Justice are taking on this are specifically designed to protect Donald Trump?
What else? I mean, that's their whole business model. In fact, they're trying to reorganize American constitutional jurisprudence and the rule of law around the idea that the entire executive branch serves one guy. That's the unitary executive theory, that this is all about serving whatever Donald Trump wants. So yeah, I can't imagine what other interests they have in mind.
And now, according to Congressman Jamie Raskin, who sits on the House Oversight Committee, they're facing whistleblowers from inside the FBI and DOJ who are coming forward to say that the administration is actively violating the law, obstructing justice, and protecting Donald Trump personally. Raskin went on the record saying that his office and committee have been approached by federal law enforcement officials who are upset about the non-compliance with the Epstein Transparency Act. These are career professionals, people who've spent their lives in federal service, who are now so disturbed by what they're seeing that they're willing to risk their careers to speak up. And what are they saying? That the DOJ's actions aren't about protecting victims. They're not about national security. They're not about legitimate privacy concerns. They're about one thing and one thing only: protecting Donald Trump from criminal exposure. Raskin put it bluntly when he was asked what percentage of the DOJ's actions are about protecting victims versus covering up for Trump. His answer? Probably 0 and 100. 0 effort to protect survivors, 100% effort to shield Trump, his family, his friends, and his business and social network from accountability.
And here's where things get even darker. The documents that have been released, even in their heavily redacted form, are catastrophic for Trump. One letter, purportedly written by Jeffrey Epstein before his death, explicitly named Donald Trump as someone who loves assaulting younger women just like Jeffrey Epstein does. The letter described assaults on girls, on minors, and suggested that Epstein was projecting that he would be taking his own life in prison. Now, the DOJ has since claimed that this letter is fake, part of a broader effort to cast doubt on any document that directly implicates Trump. But here's the problem. They released it first. They put it out there at midnight, let it circulate for hours, let the media cover it, and only then did they retroactively claim it was fabricated. The same thing happened with an AI-generated video allegedly showing Epstein attempting suicide in his cell. The DOJ released it, it went viral, and then they said, oh, by the way, that's fake. It was uploaded to YouTube in October 2020. It has no relevance to the case. So why was it in the official Epstein files released by the Department of Justice?
Why are they putting out materials they know are false or irrelevant, and then using those materials to muddy the waters and create confusion about what's real and what's not? And this is where the strategy becomes clear. The Trump DOJ isn't just trying to redact evidence, they're trying to redact reality. They're trying to make the American public so confused, so overwhelmed with conflicting information, so exhausted by the sheer volume of claims and counterclaims that we just give up on finding the truth. It's a classic authoritarian playbook. Flood the zone with so much noise that signal becomes impossible to detect. Release real documents alongside fake ones.
claim that damning evidence is fabricated, accuse whistleblowers of partisanship, threaten legal consequences for anyone who doesn't play along, and hope that by the time the dust settles, the public has moved on to the next outrage. But it's not working. And the reason it's not working is because too many people inside the system still believe in the rule of law. We're seeing FBI agents, DOJ attorneys, congressional staffers, and federal prosecutors who are unwilling to participate in this cover-up. They're coming forward, they're sharing information with oversight committees, and they're making it clear that what's happening right now is not normal, not legal, and not acceptable. Raskin warned that anyone at the Justice Department who's involved in obstructing compliance with the Epstein Transparency Act could be prosecuted for obstruction of justice. And while Pam Bondi, Trump's current Attorney General, isn't going to bring those charges, the next administration will. In 2029, there will be a new president, a new Attorney General, and a reckoning for everyone who participated in this cover-up. That's not a threat. That's a statement of fact. The law doesn't have a statute of limitations on obstruction of justice. People who are violating federal law right now to protect Donald Trump will eventually face consequences, and they know it. That's why they're starting to talk. Now, let's talk about Trump's post on Truth Social, because this is where the psychological dimension of this crisis becomes impossible to ignore. Trump wrote, and I'm paraphrasing here because the full post is even more bizarre, that he's hosting the Kennedy Center Honors, that it's going to be broadcast on CBS and streaming on Paramount+. And then he asks, would you like me to leave the presidency in order to make hosting a full-time job? He frames it as if this is something the American people are begging him to do, as if we're all desperate for more Donald Trump on our screens, more Donald Trump commentary, more Donald Trump inserting himself into every cultural moment. But here's the thing. Nobody wants that. Nobody is asking for that. What the American people want is for him to stop committing crimes, stop lying, stop abusing power, and ideally, yes, stop being president. But not because we want him to host award shows, because we want accountability. The fact that Trump is even floating the idea of resignation, even as a rhetorical question, even wrapped in his usual narcissism and grievance, tells you everything you need to know about his state of mind right now. This is a man who is deeply rattled. The Epstein revelations are not going away. The legal exposure is not diminishing. The institutional pushback is not softening, and he knows it. He's watching his own Justice Department fracture. He's watching whistleblowers come forward. He's watching Congress prepare for investigations and potential obstruction charges. He's watching his approval ratings crater, his allies in the Senate start to distance themselves, and his 2026 midterm prospects collapse in real time. And unlike other scandals he's weathered, unlike impeachment or January 6th or classified documents, this one cuts deeper. Because this isn't about politics. This is about children. This is about sexual abuse. This is about a pattern of predatory behavior that he cannot spin, cannot deflect, and cannot make go away with a tweet or a rally or a legal delay tactic. Okay, let's break down what this actually means, because there are multiple layers here that need to be understood if you want to grasp the full scope of what's happening. First, understand that the Epstein Transparency Act was passed specifically because Congress and the American public lost faith in the executive branch's willingness to voluntarily disclose information about Epstein. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a law. It mandates disclosure. It sets deadlines. It creates legal obligations. And violating those obligations is a federal crime. The DOJ doesn't get to pick and choose which laws it follows. It doesn't get to redact documents because they're politically inconvenient. It doesn't get to claim executive privilege over evidence of criminal conduct, and it certainly doesn't get to selectively release materials designed to create confusion and protect the president. What we're seeing right now is a textbook case of obstruction of justice, and it's happening in plain sight. Second, the whistleblowers coming forward from the FBI and DOJ are not partisan actors. These are career law enforcement professionals who have served under Democratic and Republican administrations. They've worked on counterterrorism, organized crime, public corruption, and yes, human trafficking and sex crimes. They know what a legitimate investigation looks like. They know what proper document handling looks like. They know what compliance with congressional mandates looks like. And what they're seeing right now violates every norm, every protocol, and every legal standard they've been trained to uphold. When these people come forward and say, this is wrong, this is illegal, and I can't be part of it, that's not politics, that's conscience, that's integrity. And it's a sign that the institution itself is rejecting what Trump is trying to force it to do.
Third, the implications for Trump's second-term agenda are catastrophic. He came into office in 2025 with big plans: massive tariffs, immigration crackdowns, reshaping the federal workforce, reorienting foreign policy around personal relationships and transactional deals, consolidating executive power through the unitary executive theory that Jamie Raskin referenced, the idea that the entire executive branch serves one person, the president, and exists to execute his will without institutional checks or balances. But all of that depends on political capital, on congressional support, on public approval, and on the perception of legitimacy. And right now, Trump has none of those things. His approval rating is in free fall. Republicans in Congress are starting to publicly question his judgment. Moderate GOP senators who were willing to give him the benefit of the doubt on policy are now facing enormous pressure from constituents who are horrified by the Epstein revelations. And Democrats are preparing to make this the centerpiece of their 2026 midterm campaign. Not inflation, not immigration, not foreign policy, but this. The question of whether the President of the United States is a sexual predator who's using the Department of Justice to cover up his crimes. Fourth, and this is crucial, the institutional revolt we're seeing isn't limited to the DOJ. We're hearing reports of unease at the FBI, where agents are frustrated that resources are being diverted from actual investigations to participate in this cover-up. We're hearing concerns from federal judges who are watching the executive branch flout a law passed by Congress and wondering whether they'll need to step in with contempt orders or injunctions. We're hearing from career diplomats who are worried that America's moral authority on human rights and rule of law is being obliterated by a president who's actively obstructing a sex trafficking investigation. And we're hearing from international allies, particularly in Europe, who are watching this unfold and asking themselves whether they can trust a United States that's led by someone who's more concerned with protecting himself than upholding justice. Fifth, the economic and political fallout is already starting to materialize. Markets don't like uncertainty. Investors don't like chaos. And right now, the United States looks like a country where the rule of law is optional, where institutions can be weaponized for personal protection, and where the president might resign at any moment. That's not a stable investment environment. We're already seeing capital flows shift towards safer assets. We're seeing foreign direct investment decisions being delayed. We're seeing multinational corporations reconsider expansions in the U.S. because they don't know whether contracts, regulations, or even basic legal frameworks will be honored if they conflict with Trump's personal interests. And politically, this is a gift to Democrats heading into 2026. They don't have to defend Biden's economic record. They don't have to defend inflation or immigration policy. They can run on one simple message. Do you want to be represented by a party that's covering up for a sexual predator? Or do you want accountability, transparency, and a return to the rule of law? That's a winning message in suburban districts, among independents, and even among moderate Republicans who are disgusted by what they're seeing. Sixth, there's the international dimension, and this is where things get truly dangerous. America's credibility on human rights, on combating human trafficking, on supporting survivors of sexual violence is being destroyed in real time. How can the United States credibly pressure other countries to investigate trafficking networks when our own president is obstructing an investigation into the most notorious trafficker in modern American history? How can we sanction authoritarian regimes for silencing whistleblowers when our own DOJ is retaliating against agents who try to uphold the law? How can we claim to be a beacon of justice and transparency when we're actively engaged in one of the most brazen cover-ups in recent memory? The answer is we can't, and our adversaries know it. Russia, China, Iran, and every other country that's been on the receiving end of American moral lectures about human rights is watching this and laughing. They're using it in their propaganda. They're citing it in international forums. And they're telling their own populations, see, the Americans are hypocrites. They don't actually believe in the values they preach. That's a strategic disaster that will take decades to recover from. Seventh, we need to talk about what happens next legally, because this is far from over.
Congress has subpoena power. The House Oversight Committee, now led by Democrats after gains in the 2024 election, can and will haul DOJ officials in for testimony under oath. They can compel the release of unredacted documents. They can refer criminal charges to the next Attorney General. And if the DOJ continues to stonewall, federal judges can hold officials in contempt, impose fines, and even order arrests. We've seen this playbook before, during Watergate, during Iran-Contra, during the Clinton impeachment. When the executive branch tries to cover up wrongdoing, the other branches of government have tools to fight back, and they will use them. The question is how long it takes, how much damage is done in the meantime, and whether Trump resigns before he's forced out. Eighth, there's the question of what Trump knew and when he knew it, and this is where the first administration comes into play. Jeffrey Epstein died in August 2019 while Trump was president, and while William Barr, whose father gave Epstein his first teaching job despite having no qualifications, was Attorney General.
The circumstances of Epstein's death have always been suspicious. The broken cameras, the guards who fell asleep, the failure of suicide watch protocols. And now we have Steve Bannon, one of Trump's closest advisors, on record weeks before Epstein's death saying that Epstein was Trump's biggest nightmare, and that Trump must be waking up in the middle of the night sweating bullets, knowing that Epstein could testify about their relationship. We have reports of secret meetings between Trump and Ghislaine Maxwell. We have flight logs showing Trump on Epstein's plane. We have photographs, witness statements, and now, potentially, documents that the current DOJ is desperately trying to suppress. The question isn't whether Trump was involved with Epstein. We know he was. The question is how deeply, for how long, and whether the federal government under his first administration took steps to ensure that Epstein never had the chance to talk.
And finally, there's the psychological and political question of what Trump does next. He's a narcissist who's built his entire identity around the idea that he's a winner, that he's untouchable, that he can outlast any scandal and outmaneuver any opponent. But this is different. This isn't a policy failure or a political loss. This is a moral collapse. This is evidence that he's not just a corrupt politician or a norm-breaking president. This is evidence that he's a predator, a criminal, and someone who's willing to use the full power of the federal government to protect himself from accountability. And for the first time in his life, he's facing a situation where his usual tools, lying, deflecting, attacking, suing, bribing, pardoning, don't work. You can't pardon yourself from public disgust. You can't sue away witness testimony. You can't bully a movement of survivors into silence. And you can't redact the truth out of existence, no matter how many pages you cover in black ink.
So here's the bottom line. Donald Trump is not going to resign to become a full-time host of award shows. That post on Truth Social was a cry for help, disguised as narcissistic bluster. What he's really asking is whether there's any way out of this nightmare that doesn't involve criminal prosecution, historical disgrace, and the complete destruction of whatever legacy he thought he was building. And the answer, based on everything we're seeing, is no, there isn't. The Epstein files are going to keep coming out because the law requires it and because whistleblowers inside the system are making sure compliance happens eventually. The legal exposure is going to keep growing because obstruction of justice is a crime and because Congress is going to investigate. The political damage is going to keep mounting because voters are not going to forget that their president tried to cover up his involvement with a child sex trafficker. And the institutional revolt is going to keep intensifying because there are still enough people in government who believe that no one, not even the president, is above the law.
What we're watching right now is the beginning of the end of Trump's second term, and possibly of his freedom. This isn't going to be resolved with a rally or a tweet or a legal delay. This is going to be resolved in courtrooms, in congressional hearings, in the ballot box in 2026, and ultimately in the judgment of history. Trump knows this, his inner circle knows this, and that's why he's floating the idea of resignation, even if he can't bring himself to actually say the words. Over the next few weeks, watch for more whistleblowers to come forward. Watch for more documents to be leaked or subpoenaed. Watch for congressional hearings to ramp up. Watch for criminal referrals to be made to the next Attorney General. Watch for Republicans in competitive districts to start distancing themselves. And watch for Trump to become more erratic, more desperate, and more dangerous as the walls close in. This story is far from over.
In fact, it's just beginning. And what happens next could reshape American politics, American justice, and America's place in the world for the next decade. Keep your eyes on this. Stay informed. Demand accountability. And don't let anyone tell you that this doesn't matter or that it's just politics. This is about whether we're a nation of laws or a nation where the powerful can commit crimes and cover them up with impunity. That question has never been more urgent, and the answer has never been more in doubt.